Psychology of the hustle. Why your brain thinks busyness is survival, the status of the grind, and the ancestral fear. Imagine a room perfectly designed for relaxation. It's quiet, the lighting is soft, and there are no notifications, no deadlines, and no demands on your time. For many, this sounds like a dream. But for a growing number of people in the year 2026, this room is a high-tech torture chamber. The moment the external noise stops, a visceral internal siren begins to wail. Your chest tightens, your mind begins to race with what-ifs, and a crushing sense of guilt settles in because you aren't being productive. This is the psychological trap of the modern era, experiential avoidance through constant movement. When the world goes silent, your nervous system finally has the space to speak, and often it only knows how to scream. We are living in the middle of a global psychological experiment called hustle culture, the glorification of overwork as a moral virtue. In this world, stress is no longer a warning sign, it is a badge of honor. We have built a civilization where "how are you" is almost always answered with "busy but good," as if being overwhelmed is the only proof that we are successful. But why did we choose this? Why does a lack of leisure time feel like a status symbol today, when for most of human history, the goal of wealth was to do absolutely nothing? To find the answer, we have to look at a radical shift in how we signal our value to the tribe. Historically, status was signaled through conspicuous consumption of goods, fancy clothes, large houses, and expensive jewelry. But research now shows we have transitioned to the conspicuous consumption of time. In a world where physical goods are mass-produced and easily accessible, the rarest resource is the individual themselves. By being busy and overworked, you are signaling that your human capital is in high demand, that you are a scarce and precious individual in the global job market. We aren't just working to survive, we are working to prove that we are worth the space we occupy. But this isn't just a social game. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism that has been hijacked by the 21st century. For our ancestors, inactivity was often a death sentence. If you weren't gathering food, building shelter, or defending the tribe, you were a liability. Evolution hardwired us to seek competence because status and power in human societies are rooted in the ability to solve problems. High-ranking individuals in the ancestral tribe weren't just the strongest, they were the most competent. Today, your brain still equates competence with survival, but it has confused solving problems with clearing an endless inbox. This leads to a terrifying phenomenon known as identity fusion. In hustle culture, what you do becomes who you are. When your identity is entirely fused with your professional output, a missed deadline or a bad performance review is no longer just a setback, it is an existential threat. The brain's threat detection systems, designed to protect you from predators, respond to career disappointments with the same intensity as physical danger. This creates a state of chronic activation where your body is perpetually flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, even when you are technically off the clock. The tragedy is that this relentless rise and grind mentality is built on a biological lie. The grind assumes that more hours always lead to more output. But behavioral science reveals that cognitive output per hour drops sharply after 50 hours of work per week. By working 70 or 80 hours, you aren't actually producing more. You are simply paying a higher biological price for the illusion of progress. We have become stochastic parrots of productivity, repeating the motions of work while our creative and analytical capacities wither under the weight of cognitive overload. Why can't we just stop? Why does rest trigger such intense anxiety that we would rather burn out than sit still? To understand the addiction to the grind, we have to look inside the prediction machine of the brain and uncover the chemical loop that makes the hustle more addictive than any drug. We have to understand the dopamine treadmill and how the system of wanting has replaced the experience of liking in our daily lives. The dopamine treadmill and the calibration of effort. If you've ever finished a massive project, felt a brief spark of joy, and then immediately felt a hollow, urgent need to find the next thing to do, you have experienced the great neurological glitch of the 21st century. We often assume that we work hard because we enjoy the results. But neuroscience reveals a much stranger truth. Your brain doesn't actually care about the reward nearly as much as it cares about the pursuit. To understand why the hustle is so addictive, we have to look at a series of radical experiments conducted by neuroscientist Kent Berridge in the late 1990s. For decades, the world believed dopamine was the pleasure chemical, the hit of joy you get when you eat a cookie or get a promotion. Barrage overturned this by creating rats whose dopamine systems were completely destroyed. According to the old theory, these rats should have been miserable. But when Barrage placed sugar water directly on their tongues, the rats showed every sign of pleasure. They still liked the taste. What they couldn't do was work for it. Put that sugar water just a few inches away, and the dopamine-depleted rats would literally starve to death surrounded by food they enjoyed. Barrage proved that dopamine isn't about liking, it is about wanting. It is the neurochemical of incentive salience, the signal that says that thing over there is worth getting up for. In hustle culture, we are like those rats, but in reverse. We have overstimulated our wanting system to the point where we are perpetually pursuing tasks we don't even like anymore, simply because our brain is screaming that we must pursue them to survive. But how does the brain decide what is worth the effort? It uses a mechanism discovered by Wolfram Schultz called reward prediction error. Think of your brain as a high-speed bookie. Every time you start a task, opening a spreadsheet, or checking an email, your dopamine system runs a prediction. How much will this pay off? When the outcome is better than expected, positive prediction error, you get a surge of dopamine that stamps that action with a "do this again" tag. But here is the trap. As you get better at your job, the rewards become predictable. Predictability results in zero prediction error, meaning the task feels progressively less engaging. To get that same survival level hit, you have to work faster, harder, and take on more uncertain challenges. Hustle culture is essentially a productivity treadmill, where the goalposts move with every achievement, ensuring that the hit gets shorter and requires greater effort to reproduce. This leads us to a phenomenon that changes the entire picture of the grind. In 2012, Michael Treadway found that dopamine doesn't just drive motivation, it controls the subjective cost of effort itself. People with higher dopamine signaling consistently choose harder tasks because, to them, those tasks actually feel easier. On your most productive days, you aren't tougher, your dopamine system is simply reducing the perceived cost of work. The task that feels like pushing a boulder uphill on a low dopamine day feels like coasting downhill when your system is properly calibrated. The danger of the modern always-on world is that we are constantly exploiting this system. Every notification, every variable ratio reinforcement from social media, the digital equivalent of a slot machine, delivers unpredictable reward signals that hijack our attention. When your dopamine system is bathed in these zero-effort spikes all day, it undergoes a process that neuroscientist Anna Lembke calls a hedonic set-point shift. Your brain's baseline for what feels normal rises. When you flood the system with easy, frequent rewards, everything that falls below that new, elevated baseline, like sitting through a long meeting, reading a book, or just being still, begins to feel like punishment. This is why rest triggers anxiety. Your brain is so calibrated to the high-intensity grind that the absence of stimulation is interpreted as a negative prediction error, a signal that you are failing to gather the resources needed for survival. We have built a world that trains our brains to fear the silence. We have hijacked our survival instincts to fuel a $200 subscription panic and an $80-hour work week. We aren't just busy, we are neurologically trapped in a state of chronic activation, where our threat detection systems are perpetually firing because we've forgotten how to tell the difference between getting things done and staying alive. But what happens when the treadmill finally breaks? What is the true cost of cognitive debt when it comes due? To find the answer, we have to look at the macroeconomics of burnout and uncover the final strategy for reclaiming our time in an era that wants to erase it. We have to learn how to out-recover the competition, the macroeconomics of exhaustion, and the recovery revolution. We have seen how the dopamine treadmill hijacks our brains, but the most chilling part of hustle culture isn't just what it does to you today, it's the cognitive debt it forces you to pass on to the next generation. We often treat our exhaustion as a personal price we pay for success. But the data shows that this price is actually a structural leak in the global economy. In a landmark 2025 study using Swedish administrative data, researchers quantified the true economic burden of burnout. They discovered that burnout doesn't just lower your current output, it results in a permanent earnings loss of roughly 12% that persists even 7 years after the initial collapse. On a national scale, this grind tax reduces aggregate labor income by a staggering 3.6%. We are building a world that is literally getting poorer because it refuses to sit still. But the failure isn't just financial, it is biological and familial. Burnout is a contagion that spills over into your home. When a worker burns out, their spouse's income often drops as well, as they are forced into a caregiving role. Even more terrifying, parental burnout during a child's school years significantly reduces that child's future academic performance and college enrollment rates. The hustle you think is securing your family's future may actually be eroding your children's potential before they even enter the workforce. This leads us to the ultimate mystery. If the grind is so destructive, why do we still worship it? The answer lies in the identity productivity fusion. We have been conditioned to believe that outworking the competition is the only way to win. But the science of high performance tells a completely different story. The best in the world, surgeons, chess grandmasters, and elite scientists, don't actually work more hours than you. Research shows they work in highly focused bursts of 3 to 5 hours and then spend a disproportionate amount of time in deliberate recovery. They realized a secret that hustle culture tries to hide. They don't out-hour the competition, they out-recover them. They treat rest not as a reward for finishing work, but as a mandatory performance input. So, what is the strategy for the year 2026? How do we practice polite audacity in a world of infinite notifications? It starts with protecting the first hour. Your dopamine system is most sensitive in the morning. If the first thing you do is check email or social media, you are letting the variable ratio reinforcement of the internet calibrate your brain's baseline to a level that makes deep work feel like punishment. True professionals draw a line in the sand. They dive into meaningful work before the digital slop can hijack their reward circuitry. We must also embrace psychological detachment. This isn't just logging off. It is the active process of mentally disengaging from work problems so the nervous system can return to its baseline. It requires the courage to be unproductive and the wisdom to realize that when the noise stops and your anxiety feels louder, it's not because you are failing. It's because your nervous system finally has the space to speak. The era of the tireless machine is a lie. You are a biological organism with finite cognitive energy. In a world of synthetic reality and 24/7 hurry sickness, the most revolutionary act you can perform is to value your own stillness. Your heart has a budget of 3 billion beats. Don't waste them on the illusion of busyness. Reclaim your time. Reclaim your identity. Because in the end, the system doesn't need your grind. It needs your intelligence. And intelligence only grows in the gaps between the work. The treadmill is moving, but you have the power to step off.